So, it's Nicole from GetYourRockOut chatting to Matthias from Turisas. First of all, Matthias, something I've been wondering for quite a while, are your vocals described as being a tenor or baritone or something else?
I guess people would put me in the baritone range. Tenor is a bit too far of a stretch for me.
Okay. What vocal training have you had, or do you still receive it?
Well, we kind of started out from nowhere. I mean, when it comes to playing and everything, we kind of started out with no skills whatsoever and kind of just sort of learned along the way as we went along. I mean, I had, had music studies and everything, but never really played in a band and never really sang anything. I just sort of was appointed the singer of the band, and that was kind of it. And luckily it's been, album by album, I think I've been also able to improve my vocals and also kind of do more challenging stuff. Basically my identity has never really been 100% like being a vocalist as such, because my role in the band is much more kind of producing our records and writing the music and kind of leading the band and doing also a lot of sort of management level stuff, like boring email stuff, arranging things and that kind of stuff. So vocalist has always been somewhere there as, third, fourth place or something.
Wow.
But I've still sort of tried to keep some level of I don't know, what do you call it, kind of pride in what you do, and try to sort of, whenever I have time and possibility to also develop that side of our music, and I think kind of managed to do so as well with the previous records.
Because from your music, it sounds like you've had probably extensive vocal training. It's quite surprising to hear that you're sort of started from scratch. Have you had any training in sort of the production and management side then? Was that also from scratch?
Well, that's also very sort of jumping in the sea and learning to swim. Kind of the same method works for both, I think. Well, in my case, has worked for both. So, I mean, by doing stuff, you learn how to do stuff. And maybe in many cases, like in general in life, people are kind of scared to start doing things because of not knowing how to. And I think the best way is just to sort of, jump in and you learn.
That's probably very good advice. Also, how do you pronounce Turisas? I mean, in the UK, I've heard many sort of, again, different pronunciations of Turisas, Turisas or Turisas, or I've heard it's Turisas. So, how do you say it's pronounced?
Well, again, in Finnish, it would be Turisas with a completely different R.
Is it a rolled R?
Yeah, but
okay.
And there's really no stress on none of the syllables, really. It's just Turisas. But so I think I usually say Turisas or Turisas or something. I don't know. I probably use them all myself as well. Same as with my name, like I'm Matthias or Matthias or Matthias or Matthias or whatever. It depends.
Many names. I've read in current press that you're taking a more raw and organic sound with your new album, Turisas 2013. What do you mean by this?
Well, it's on the previous albums, I think we've had the tendency to sort of over analyze and overthink everything and polish everything to the very end. And it's kind of been how I work and the style, and it's one way of doing things, but it becomes a bit kind of working like in a laboratory in a way. It gets pretty far from kind of spontaneous creative music when you're sort of writing notes for every drum fill and everything is sort of written in there, and then you sort of just play it as is. So I think on this album we wanted to kind of refresh a lot of conventions and ways how we work. I mean, on every album we tried to always find a new way to do things and not repeat the album we done in the past. but to put us sort of out of the comfort zone and make something that we don't really know what the outcome will be, and we don't really know if we'll pull it off or not, and that kind of thing. That's always sort of a great spark for creativity. And on this album, I think it was about, well, the production, first of all, not working in a traditional studio as we've done before, but hiring a house in the middle of nowhere, basically, and living there in a very isolated bubble for months, and writing the music and recording the music ourselves, and taking, like, making the whole production into a sort of very intensive session. And also about, like, we have some new musicians in the band, about leaving more room for kind of spontaneous mistakes and all sorts of stuff to happen, and just sort of living with it as it is, and not needing necessarily to go through every possible option of everything to be satisfied with one. So it's also a sound question, but it's also a sort of mentality question of how we approach the album. I think in the outcome you can hear it's less. We wanted to make an album that sounds more like a band playing, more of the human touch and more rough around the edges than we might have done in the past.
You could say this is more like reflective on live music, because when you play your music live, if you make a mistake or make a little improvisation, then, you know, that's different. So would you say it's kind of reflective on that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we always had a reputation as a great live band and got a lot of good feedback as a live band. And then again, our albums have usually been like these huge puzzles that, I mean, it's just a way of working, how it's been, basically. We always, like, focus on the music first in the studio as a separate project, and then we sort of take it down to pieces and rearrange it for the stage. And I think that's actually cool, because we are not making any compromises on the music first. We're not sort of thinking ahead of how are we going to be able to do this live, but we just make the most interesting and best music we can, and then we have to figure that out later. And but still, I mean, you know, on this album we wanted to do more takes in the studio that are more live and not I mean, so many metal albums, the drumming and stuff like that has become kind of more of a sport than music, really, and it's more about the technicality and being very precise and stuff like that, and less about the sort of soul of it all, and playing as a band. And I think those were the sort of approaches we kind of focused a lot on this album, and I think you can hear it as well. But it's also in the mix and the sound and everything, using as little digital stuff as required, and mixing on analog gear and mastering on old tape machines, and using also like old analog synths and those kind of old school circuits and stuff. It's kind of a combination of all things, but that was the sort of general approach, and I think this is how it turned out.
It sounds all very interesting and exciting. When you were like locked away from the outside world during the recording and creative process, do you feel like this was added to the creativity? It helped with the creativity?
Well, it's kind of, I think it's kind of necessary in the end, because sooner or later it's going to get to the point where you just wake up and you start working on the thing, and at some point you just are too tired to carry on. You have to sleep in the middle, and it's just like very practical not to and do stuff, to sort of just focus on that completely, and not have to deal with kind of everyday chores or whatever on the side of it. So yeah, it does. But the whole kind of living together, mostly it was, well, I lived on my own for a couple of months in that remote house when it's more about like still working on the songwriting and stuff. And later on, our guitar player Jussi moved in with me for the remaining time, and then it was the two of us there mostly, and then other guys would come in and do their parts and leave. But we were kind of the regulars who were based there through the whole session. And yeah, I mean, it's a vibe of its own, and it's very different than going to a studio and going home and coming back in the morning. Of course, in some way, it's good that you get a distance from it, but when the schedule gets very tight and you're going to be working with it from morning to late in the night anyway, it's you can just as well sort of live in the same setting. And it's kind of funny now actually, because now when it's getting into August, it's starting to be like 1 year since we moved in. Of course, we did songwriting on our own through last summer and last spring as well, but the sort of intensive phase started with moving into the house in late August last year. And now when the nights are starting to get dark again here in Finland, it's sort of like I'm starting to get that sort of special vibe of being in that house and being like, even if I'm not there, like the whole feeling of it all, of being like those dark nights and being kind of feeling very creative and inspired and kind of having that magic. And I'm sort of picking up the same types of books I was reading at that time. For instance, like I was, for example, reading some Moomin books. So I sort of started with that now again when it's sort of the same season came, and it's sort of the same vibe is happening even if I'm not there right now. So it's pretty unique and you know, pretty good. Of course, pretty rough at times as well, because it's so intensive that there's no kind of escape or anything. With
Yeah. Oh, it sounds all very special. It sounds like you really engage yourself with the production of the music. In I think around May last year, you posted a picture on Facebook of an elaborately decorated library. Was this in the house that you've been talking about, or was this elsewhere?
No, the library must have been. That's probably the National Library in Finland.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that was when we came back from tour, and usually like all our albums have kind of started out with. We've worked with some pretty big concept albums in the past, and it's a lot of research and looking into a lot of things. And this is kind of where this album started as well. It starts from opening a lot of books and starting to think what to write about, and that's where the whole process starts. So no, the house wasn't quite that would have been a great palette. But the house was a kind of like very rundown old creaky wooden house where the wind would, you know, bang things, and you'd hear the sort of branches hitting the windows, and you'd have like, we had mice living in the house, and sometimes like we had like all this cabling obviously running from one end to the other through all these rooms. And one morning when we got to work, we realized that there's no signal coming through, and we kind of followed the cable until we realized that somewhere along the line we'd had to close a door and left it closed, and kind of blocked the passage of this mouse